Hola, hola, ahora sí. Hola de nuevo, estoy aquí en el escenario otra vez y ahora vamos a hablar, será una conversación en inglés con, como decía Antonio, con Lianne. Hello Lianne, how are you? Thanks for being here with us from the comfort of your home. Sonido.
Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure. Congratulations for the launch of Back 4 Blood. I personally really enjoy the game, and I hope we can learn a little bit more about the process of development the game. As Antonio was saying, you are in Turtle Rock an executive producer, and I would like you to explain to us what exactly an executive producer does in Turtle Rock.
Yeah, absolutely. So it does, mean different things for different studios. At Turtle Rock, what it means is I manage the production department. So all of the producers report into me. I provide high level oversight for our projects. So kind of make sure that we're either on track or talking about any issues that we're having with the project. And then I also do a lot of the communication with any publishers that we're working with. So with Back for Blood, I was working with Warner Brothers very closely.
And how did you get to this position? What did you study, and how was your path that
I
did
think
you?
sorry, what's
Yeah, yeah,
really
yeah.
interesting with production in particular is I actually think that you'll find that a lot of different people have very different backgrounds. I went to university for a computing science degree. I wanted to be a programmer, and I actually worked in software development for a while. And I found that I really enjoyed the process of a project coming together. So different people working together, figuring out what your biggest risks are, what questions you need to answer. So I actually went and I got an after degree. So I did another bachelor's degree in business. And then I was fortunate enough to get a first job as an associate producer in the industry. So I moved from Canada to Texas at a company called Timegate Studios, where I started as an associate producer, and I was there for several years. I became more of a project manager. And then I joined Turtle Rock as a producer on Evolve, and I became executive producer. I think it was like a year and a half, 2 years after I started there. And it was kind of, I started looking at all different parts of the project, asking questions, helping people out. And so kind of just started doing the thing and received the title as a, hey, you're already doing this. So uh, this is what you are for us. And I've been doing that ever since, and I love it.
Before going deep into Back for Blood, in the audience we have, I think so, probably many young indie developers. And I know for a fact that many developers here don't have producers in their teams. What could you say? What could you say to encourage them to incorporate such a role in their teams?
The thing that I always kind of joke, but it's not really a joke, is if everybody could communicate clearly or was used to having that 1,000-foot view of your project, producers wouldn't be needed. But as a project grows and you have different pieces that have to come together, producers help as like facilitators and communicators. And so we're able to make sure the right people are talking, that the right people are aware of something before they start a system, they're aware of certain requirements, or just making sure that, we're tracking that information and everybody is involved as they should. So if you don't have a producer, you're actually wrong. You have people who are operating as producers on your team, but they're spending energy doing that production work, that project management, that communication that they could be putting towards their expertise. And so it's something that I see a lot in projects. They'll be like, hey, we don't have producers because, our lead is really good at organizing things. And I always ask the question, well, if you had a producer helping manage the project and tracking those things, what more could your lead be doing for your project? So I would ask the question and, maybe challenge yourselves to identify who's actually doing that work and then find somebody that wants to do it so that you can free up those folks to do other things. So.
Okay, thanks for your advice. I'm sure that people here would appreciate. And now let's go talk to about Back for Blood. let's go to topic. What are the challenges that a company like Turtle Rock face when developing such a game, considering that Turtle Rock basically invented or created for the first time the cooperative for FPS game?
I don't know if I would call them new challenges. A lot of the challenges that we dealt with, I think, are ones that any company deals with, because when you have a history or people are used to certain games, they come into it with certain expectations. So from our perspective, rather than worry about what, those expectations were, or, saying to ourselves, hey, we're going to be held up against this other title a lot, what we said was, how do we make the funnest, best game that we want to play? What are we looking for out of a co-op zombie shooter? And those were kind of the questions that we asked ourselves, and we play test a lot. And it was 2 months into development, we were already starting to play test things. And so we made sure that we were playing, that we were asking ourselves, is this fun? What do we want to do? And then we took from our collective experiences. So like the team is made up of a lot of different people with different backgrounds. We've worked on different games. We're also gamers ourselves, so we play a lot of different games. And so we took from those shared experiences as both players and developers and put that towards it. So we wanted to make sure that we were making it the best that it could be. I think that the hardest things in it were making sure that you stayed true to what somebody wants out of a 4-player co-op first-person shooter. So like sometimes your temptation might be like, hey, I hate when I get pinned, and so I want to be able to save myself. But then you have to ask yourself, okay, if we give people that kind of autonomy where you can essentially play like a lone wolf and you can just run through the level and do fine yourself, are we staying true to the spirit of a 4-player co-op shooter? Or what innovations do we want to add? But you also want to make sure you're not innovating too much. Something that like I've learned on past projects is that if you have too many risks, or you're trying to answer too many complex questions, that can kind of prevents you from really focusing on the things that you need to refine and make feel really good, because you're so busy answering these questions and doing these other things. So that's kind of it. I don't know that any of them were new. Really, the new challenges in the last like 2 years was adapting to work from home. In any project that you work on, I feel like one of the things that comes up as a post-mortem topic is always communication. And so when you send everybody home, where we're behind these screens and we're relying on people checking their email, going into Slack, showing up to meetings, communication becomes even more important. And so that was something that we had to really figure out and adapt to throughout that. And that's a challenge that I think every studio or team really that had to move to work from home had to adapt to.
Yeah, it's been a difficult transition for all of us, but at the end you managed to launch such a huge game, so the result was good enough, right?
Thank you. Yes.
So can you give us some examples of lessons from Evolve or Left 4 Dead that have proven useful to use again in the Back 4 Blood development?
Yeah, I think with Evolve in particular, a lot of what we learned was working with larger like monsters. So we have a lot bigger ridden in Back 4 Blood, and that was something that we were able to do confidently because we had done it before on Evolve. But we also took the lessons learned there, and we made sure that you try not to repeat the same mistakes. You want to make new mistakes. You're always going to make mistakes, and that's okay. And that's actually part of the beauty of game development, is like making those mistakes and learning from them. So we utilized a lot of that. I think the big lesson that we took was also like trying not to do too many new things and make sure that you are maintaining a form of approachability in your game. Like that was something that was really important for us in Back 4 Blood. Like when you look at games like Left 4 Dead, it's very easy to jump in and play with your friends. You don't need to have a gear level, or you don't have to have done a series of things to be able to play the game. I can be playing for 200 hours, and then my friend comes in, has never played before, and can jump in and play with me, and we have relatively equal footing because like our card mechanic lets us benefit, like I can, or my friend can benefit from the selections that I've made. So that was really important to us. And then the not too many don't do too many innovative things. One of the things that we found with Evolve is it did have a very steep learning curve, so we wanted to avoid that. And then there were a lot of different concepts in it. I think the part of the beauty of Back for Blood is you jump in and you know what you're supposed to do. You have a gun and there are zombies and you're supposed to shoot the zombies. And that's very straightforward. And we wanted to make sure that that was fun. So then we introduced the card system. And what I love about it is that we found that it was actually quite intuitive. Because if I come to you and I say, you have a deck of cards and I'm going to play you a hand and you get to choose some cards out of the hand to play, that makes sense to you. And then when I come to you and I say, okay, there's this guy, this game director, person, thing coming and playing against you, and they're also going to play cards against you, and you're going to be able to see what challenges you're going to have to face. That all makes sense. And so we were trying to make sure that everything that we did was intuitive, or if there were risks, make sure there's just a few of them. So yeah, that's like a couple things that we definitely learned and we're keeping in mind.
You have mentioned a couple of times the card system,
Yes.
and it's obviously a huge pillar in the game. How did you start to think about adding cards to the game? What was the influence of the source here?
Yeah, that's always such a good question. And so our game design team was trying to come up with ways to make sure that there was a sense of progression to the game. Something that I think people expect from a lot of games nowadays is if you're gonna, we're asking you to replay levels, we're asking you to keep doing things. You want to have some sort of sense of progression, like you're always getting stronger or becoming more versatile. And at the time, a lot of our team were playing different roguelite games. And we liked the idea that, like, hey, you try something and then you go up until you hit a difficulty point, and then you unlock some things or you get a little bit stronger. And something that came very naturally to that was the idea of this card system. And we started developing that for the player. And it was actually from there that this idea of the corruption cards, which are the cards that the game director plays, came from as well. Because it was like, oh, this fits in a little bit. So it was just kind of an idea that came and we decided to try, and it actually was pretty easy to implement. We use a lot of different like gameplay mods and things like that in UE4, and our designers are able to set up quite a lot of it from a prototype perspective. So yeah, it's kind of answering a need that we had in the game, because like I mentioned earlier, a lot of games leverage things like gear level or unlocks, and we didn't want to go in that direction. We wanted something that was much more approachable and also benefited the entire team.
Okay, so another question is, in the years since Left 4 Dead launch, some games have tried to fill the gap and become the new Left 4 Dead and the new standard in the genre. But I don't think, and this is obviously my opinion, that many have been successful. Do you think that people that play these kind of games are too hard on the games? They have high expectations. How do you think they are? How do you think that Back 4 Blood can fulfill their expectations?
That's a good question. I think it's really hard to, make a game and put it out there and you have no idea what your audiences are going to think. And that's why like kind of our development philosophy was more like, let's ignore everything that's out there and focus on making sure that it's fun. And I don't know kind of the why of other games coming out. I think it's actually pretty rare that a game comes out and resonates so well with players. Like you're lucky when that happens, and you put your heart and your soul into games and you're kind of just sitting there waiting to see how your audience reacts and what players think. So I think if I were to like give advice to people working on games trying to achieve, a very particular thing, I think it's kind of pay attention to what is going on around you, like what other games are doing, but focus more on like what makes sense for your game, what is true to the vision that you're trying to achieve. So for us, with Back 4 Blood, we came up with what is it that we want? What's the tone that we want? So, most apocalyptic games out there are very like, oh, the apocalypse just happened. We're all going to die. We're panicking. We're barely just surviving. And we wanted to have a different attitude. We wanted to have a sense of progression. We figured out what are the things that we want to do. And then we asked ourselves, are the things that we are doing, these decisions that we're making, these features, this content that we're implementing, does it satisfy the vision of the game that we have? And we're always challenging ourselves, asking that. And something else that was very critical to us were the alpha and beta tests that we did, because we then wanted to put it in front of people and get that feedback and see, did we hit that? Are people interpreting the vision of the game that we came out with? So it's hard to say what other teams do. So I prefer to approach it from the perspective of like, hey, this is what we did, and this is kind of my recommendation. Like, come up with your vision, decide what it is that's important for you, for your title, and then constantly challenge yourself as to whether or not you are staying true to that.
Okay. I assume that Back 4 Blood is going to have a long tail, long life. I assume and I expect and I hope. Actually, I saw the other day the plans of future releases and updates. How do you manage to organize your current plan with all the feedback that you are having with a live game? How do you combine both?
That is definitely a very tricky problem, because I think the other thing that plays in that not a lot of people understand until they're in development is the role of first party certification. So the moment that you have a title that's on consoles, the time that you have to when you finalize your patch, your update or whatever, and roll it out to the community is a lot longer than anybody would like. So a lot of what we try to do is we do have our community bug reporting website, which we encourage everybody to use. We do look at it when issues get reported there. We try to see if we can reproduce it internally. So we take a look at that. What are the top rated issues? What is it that we can take care of there? And then, we come up with the ideas of what are the kind of changes that we would want to do. Very sorry about that. We try to figure out, what are the kinds of things that we would want to do. And then we read feedback from the community. We look at, what are they enjoying? What are they playing? We look at telemetry an awful lot. Like, we love data. And so we look at the data combined with what people are actually saying in forums, Twitter, all of social media. And we try to prioritize all of that. So we do have obligations with the updates. So we disclose, a little preview of what's coming out next year. And so what we're always trying to do is balance those obligations with the things that we want to do to respond to the community. One of the things that we have a Trello board that's public facing that I manage. If you want to look at it, you can kind of see the stuff that we're working on. But there are things that show up on there that are a result of the community bringing up things. I think like a really good example for those of you who have played, a lot of you might hate the fact that you can't remove attachments from your weapons. So, you pick up a weapon and there's some negative attachments. You don't love that. That was something that we know is not a great experience, but it's an important part of the game to us, because when you're playing, we want you to have kind of encouragement to switch weapons or try different things. But we understand that some people, they just want to be able to make that decision. And so we do have a player card that we're working on that we ended up kind of pushing up in priority, because we saw kind of, the community was like, oh, we really want this. We really want this. Please, do something about this. So we try where we can, but it's a difficult balance. Essentially, any feature or content, we gather up all of the estimates for what it would take to get it done. We look at the critical path, how long is it going to take from start to finish, because some of your work is sequential and you can't squish that time down more than a certain amount. And then we ask ourselves, when can we put it out there? When does it make sense? Do people actually want this? And we have had to pivot. I can't give specifics, but there are things that we have pivot on where we're like, oh, we think, feature A is really important, but actually the community was making a lot of noise about feature B. So we've pivoted and we try to do that as much as we can within the constraints of, as I mentioned, you've got like first party cert and that kind of thing.
One interesting thing about Back 4 Blood is the game offers both PvP and PvE. How do you manage during development to tackle and approach such different modes of gameplay?
That is definitely challenging. It's something that I think on a lot of games that I've worked on and other people that I've talked to, that is always a very challenging thing, because you kind of need to have sub portions of the team that are committed to each one, but they need to be communicating with each other. And you kind of end up going back to what I mentioned earlier, which is always asking yourself if you're meeting the vision of the game, or what it is that, you know, you told yourself that you're going to do. So with our PvP, we had to make sure that the stuff made sense with PvE. And then it was actually interesting because we initially assumed that we wouldn't do different or we wouldn't do like system level changes. But as we were playing PvP or Swarm PvP internally, we were finding that there were a bunch of player cards that you could select that actually just didn't make sense in PvP. So we got to this point where we realized that we actually needed to have the idea of PvP decks and a different collection of player cards. And that actually helped us a lot with it. So the way that we got there, though, was by iterating. So what we try to do internally, we do playtest almost every day. If we don't playtest on a day, it's because there was a bad build or maybe a really bad bug in that build. And we balance between playing PvE and PvP internally so that people are kind of playing both, giving feedback on both. You're able to hear that and balance that and ask, like, sometimes we had ideas for Swarm PvP and it was like, oh, that doesn't, like, that's too different, or that doesn't meet the vision of the game. So it's a lot of like kind of simple rules. But that's kind of how we approached it. And the big question again was like, is this fun? And part of what we liked a lot about our Swarm PvP mode was how like snackable it was, like how simple, like you're able to jump in, play a couple rounds and then jump out, and it's not like a multi-hour affair, which we think was important. And we wanted to give people an opportunity to play as the Redden too. That was very important. Like when you're playing through the PvE campaign and you kept getting hit by tall boys, I don't know, they're my least favorite. It's kind of nice and satisfying to get to play as a tall boy and do that to someone else.
Now let me ask you a more personal question about your gameplay style. Maybe what character is your favorite and why?
So from a gameplay standpoint, I tend to play as Doc because I like to have like a medic support build. I play support or healing in most games that I play. So like I play World of Warcraft a lot, and I'm a healer there. And I always kind of joke, I think it's because I'm a producer. Like this, it's what I do. I'm like a support role for life. I love helping people. The truth is you also hold people's lives in your hands, so there's a little bit of a control freak piece there. From a personality standpoint, I adore Carly. I think she's a lot of fun, and I play her if I'm not playing kind of too seriously. And I always thank our creative director Phil for making her hair purple, because he did that for me.
Okay, and one final question, because I think we are not going to have time for questions from the audience, but you just mentioned before the internal play testings that you have regularly in a daily basis. How important is for such a game or your company in the department of QA? Do you have internal QA, or do you bring people from outside? Do you relay only on metrics? What type of playtests are you running?
Sure. So, okay, so we have a couple different things. So we do have our studio play tests internally, which happen, as you mentioned, daily. That involves the entire studio, and pretty much everybody usually participates in that. If they're really busy, like they might do like twice a week or something like that. And we really encourage people to do that play testing because it puts your work in the context of the game. So I'm gonna pick on character artists a little bit, but it helps like a character artist understand, as they're working on a character and they're putting all these details into like the boots of a character. You're never going to see the bottom or most of the boots in gameplay. So it helps contextualize kind of those things. Forgive me for the very simple example with explaining that. But the benefit that we've also seen is sometimes we have a bug that we've reported to somebody, and they're like, oh, that doesn't sound like that big of a deal. And it's like, well, just, play test and you'll see. And then suddenly they're like, oh my God, I ran into that bug and that was really annoying. I'm going to fix it right away. So it helps with things like that. QA is, you cannot make a game without QA. And I mean like actual human testers that are a part of your team. And, something that I love about Turtle Rock is how much we value our QA. We have several senior level testers that have been around for a really long time. And we like to embed our testers within the teams. So like different teams will have a dedicated QA tester that becomes like a subject matter expert for there and is able to do specialized testing for them. That is just absolutely critical in my opinion. You should foster your QA, bring them in as a part of the development process because they are developers. You cannot make a game without QA. So they are developers. They're a part of the team. And so we have a good internal team. And then we also work with external QA. So Warner has a massive, wonderful QA team that we work with as well. They're easily like the best publishing QA that I've worked with. And they kind of are actually offset by us by a little bit in terms of like time zone. So they're on the East Coast and we're on the West Coast of North America. And what's nice is that when we come in the morning, they've actually already smoke tested a build for us. So we already kind of see what it is that's going on. But that is essential as well because they have a massive slew of test plans that they run through. And so they're able to verify things. So we'll explain the intent behind a feature. They put in good bugs that are like, hey, this system works this way, which we don't think makes sense given what you told us. So you kind of need a very wide breadth of types of QA. You need groups that are running test plans, and you need groups that are just kind of doing ad hoc natural testing as well. We always kind of joke that you want some of your testers to put on like their angry Reddit poster hat to just like approach the game as a player would from home and, let us know the issues that you're running into. And then lastly, we like to do the online tests because we want to get external folks as well. We also leveraged usability testing on Back for Blood. So Warner had a usability group that we worked with, and we tried to do sort of monthly tests where we would very specifically focus on one part of the game, and they would run folks through it, and they would get us not only data, but the kind of subjective opinions from everybody. So that's all kind of like the human element of QA and testing and playtesting. The other piece of it that we leverage is data. So we do gather quite a bit of data, and we dig into it with our designers, and we do have data analysts on the team, and we look at that to help highlight areas that we should dive into or things that we should take care of. And then we also look at the human side of it. So something that we're very careful about, for example, is like if somebody comes to us and says, hey, this gun or this ability is extremely overpowered, and we look at the data and actually turns out that it's not compared to everything else, we then ask ourselves, why does it feel that way? So like, is it the audio? Are there too many VFX? Like, what is it that we can address to help attract? We don't just say, oh, the data says it's not, so you're wrong, and we're not going to listen to you anymore. Like we dive a little bit deeper with that. So yes, it's so important to our process.
Absolutely. I think we are just at the end of the interview. Thank you very much for your interesting insights. Thank you for being with us today. And please bring a big applause to Lianne.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.